Just a question.
Yes.
This is obviously hypothetical. So if we keep winning, and right now we're projected to go to nationals, and I looked at the dates, and those were the presentation dates. So if I'm gone,
We'll have you present the Friday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Sweet.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know it's up in the air. Yeah, I know it's up in the air. It'd be awesome if you get to travel, and I know that you're not sure. So
Yeah, I just
we'll
wanted
play it
to-
based on that. Yeah,
Yeah.
of course.
Well, we do singlet days, like live days and things. Yeah. Those are fun, man. Not many singlet.
We like this singlet day at the,
Oh, thank you.
practice before state, we always see like.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
We'll see what first time of it. We didn't send live day, it was kind of crazy. It was like abnormally hard practice in high school.
Yeah.
And then you can dress up in anything that's red that's like really weird.
The crazy thing about wrestling is like you don't have like most sports have like a pre-practice or like a, pre-game practice. Like your pre-game practice is probably your hardest practice. You're trying to lose weight the last couple.
Yeah,
of
exactly.
I emailed you my outline. Is
Great.
this really my grade?
That is without the outline.
Oh, without the outline? Okay, but if
Now that you sent it,
it's gonna change?
yeah.
Wow,
So
the
that
outline is a big part of the, got it, okay.
Yeah.
No, 'cause I thought I heard, presentation, you said it's like an extra credit, no? I think I, okay, maybe I'm credit that one.
Yeah, but you've got it and you sent that out. So you're set. And then you should see by the end of the day, the grade will be updated to include that out. Yeah, of course.
I was freaking out. like,
No.
what?
No problem.
Also, I think I need to work on like maybe having a little bit of more information on the introduction part. Cause some of my classmates thought, like, I had a, like, I heard somebody say, like after the presentation, I overheard one of, like, the students in our class, like, I talked about them, and then they're like, oh, that's the good, she's just a child. I'm like, I'm 26, guys, what?
Oh,
I
no.
mean, I literally posted at the end of my slide that you guys can
Yeah.
ask me questions. I'm like, 19-year-old,
Oh.
thinking I'm a child.
I'm sorry. I mean,
Yeah.
I,
Super funny. I'm like, no, it's fine. I think I need to put a little bit of more information because I guess I do look young, and especially my picture that I use, and I think they just kind of freaked out.
yeah, I mean, I think it was incredibly informative and valuable. I mean, you also have a lot of students who are coming in who don't know
Yeah.
anything about, that experience. So I thought it was great. I'm sorry you heard
No,
that, but
actually, that
it's,
was great. I really love the presentation. Like, I get to share about the things I want to share.
I've loved it. So yeah, thanks CJ, and you'll see that update to your grade. Yes.
Is there like a Zoom link that I like, because I have like an appointment on, it's a follow-up appointment for,
Yeah.
but it's gonna be on March 10th.
Uh-huh.
And I was wondering if I could do like, is there like a Zoom link that I can join and for my attendance
Oh, yeah, for this class?
for this class?
Yeah.
Or do I
Yes.
have to join another section?
No, you can do that for this class. I'll just ask maybe like a couple days before if
Uh-huh.
you send up a follow-up reminder,
Okay,
then I can.
so I
reply to
can,
them.
that way I can like, attend class, but then just online, just
Yeah.
for that day.
Yep,
Okay. All right.
absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, CJ.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
But each one is. Don't argue. Show it.
Welcome back. Let's get started. Today we are building on the ideas that we've talked about from Monday regarding leadership. What does it mean to be a good leader was a question that I posed to you all in Monday's class, and we had the opportunity for us to go around and share the qualities that make for a good leader. Things such as, practicing what you preach, setting a good example for other members of the group, being open, being welcoming, being supportive, and creating the knowledge and expertise that allows you to collaborate effectively with people in the group. So today we're going to be building off of those ideas to discuss and practice what it means to exhibit good leadership, right? So we know what a good leader is. How do we do it? Knowing that many of us have either had to be leaders or will find ourselves in positions of leadership in our futures. So last class, we spent some time talking about the small group observation assignment. I want to go over just a couple more details about that and give you some additional tips as you're preparing for that one. We also took some time last class to talk a little bit about some fundamentals in leadership. So the small group observation. So as a reminder, this assignment, I'm asking you to pick a small group that you are not currently a member of and to observe one of their meetings. It should be happening live, either face-to-face or virtually, and then to report to us and in your essay about what came out from this meeting. To answer a few questions that I've received so far from folks, first of all, if you are picking a meeting that's larger than about 8 or 12 people, that's okay as long as you have a small cluster of people who are generally speaking and participating in the meeting. What I mean by that is if you were to go to a meeting, for example, ASEOU, there's a good chance that you would have a larger group of people, but you would have a smaller set of people who would generally be working through the agenda and big tasks, right? So based on the group that you're picking, you might have a number of people who are in the audience, who are a part of the group, but not actually presenting or participating material. What I'm really looking for is a small cluster of people that are interacting, that are interplaying and relating to one another, right? And having a group of people, even if it's in a larger group, who communicate with one another would qualify for this assignment, right? So don't worry about getting the numbers exactly right if you find yourself in a somewhat larger group. What wouldn't be a good candidate would be if it was just one person who is giving a presentation for 2 hours to the group. Because what I'm really looking for that'll help you in developing the assignment is, again, the dynamics and communication that's happening between people who are working through that group together, right? So pick a group that involves people collaborating, even if that group ends up being a little bit larger than small groups that we've discussed so far. A lot of the fundamentals will still apply. The second thing is I've talked to a couple of folks who've already initiated the process of reaching out to some groups and organizations. And I again encourage you to get that started as soon as possible. There are a lot of groups where perhaps for various reasons like privacy concerns, they might not consent to having somebody who observes the group as an outsider. There might also be groups that are canceling or not holding meetings at the regularly scheduled times. So it's a good idea to book that out well in advance. And in addition to that, it's also a good idea to continue to look around for backup options or other possibilities, right? Remember that if you were setting up a time to meet with a group and they canceled, right? Still your responsibility to complete the assignment on time. So I encourage, if you're coming to about a week in advance and you have not been able to secure a meeting or something canceled, right? You can always request an extension. I encourage you to do that if you recognize that you're having trouble with getting the meeting scheduled. Third of all, the small group that you pick for your observation does not necessarily have to be an EOU group. EOU is a really easy starting point, but you can pick another group or organization, maybe in your community, maybe a group that you're eyeing that a friend or family member is involved in, or a group that has more remote meetings, but you're interested in getting involved in some of them, right? I had a student last year who actually went to a meeting that was designed for mental health at their old high school and was going in as a former member of that group to report on how that meeting was running. So there are some options on how you can be involved and participating in some of these activities too. Remember that the presentations are on 13th, 15th, or 17th. That's during week 10. I'm just holding off on the form because I know there's a lot of people on the cusp of nationals travel and other competitions. So I will be circulating the form next week when those schedules are a bit more locked in. And then I wanted to share, if you haven't already seen this, I encourage you to check out the list of student clubs and organizations here at EOU. A lot of folks in the past have had success with picking one of these groups, such as Ag, Agripreneur was a pretty common one last year, of course, ASEOU. So there's a variety of different ones that you might look to. The Latino Impact, they were actually posting right outside that's open to everyone, open to the public. There's also some such as Psychology Club, or maybe it's a topic that you're tentatively interested in and want to learn more about. If you are interested or involved in an activity, but you're not actually a part of the group, that can still work. Like maybe you really like skiing and snowboarding, but you're actually not a part of the club on campus. Cool, you can still choose that and that would still count as an outside group, right? So I encourage you to continue to look around for some of these options. If there's an edge case, you're not sure if the group qualifies for this assignment, let me know and I'm happy to help to resolve that. And if you're continuing to run into issues or unsure of a group to pick, let me know. You might also consider reaching out to other folks in this class who might be involved in a group or activity that you're not a part of that you could learn more about too. Any questions related to the small group observation at this point? Again, I encourage you to think ahead for that. It's due on the 17th. That does not mean you have to have it fully written and completed and turned in if you're presenting on the 13th or 15th. You're welcome to share what you have so far if you're speaking on one of those dates. Last class, we talked about leadership, right? What does it mean to be a leader? Well, a lot of people brought up the importance of addressing a challenge or issue, right? Of having the resources and skills that you need to develop a plan, right? To be able to work effectively to resolve something. And the idea here that being a good leader means developing a set of skills over time that allow you to take on this role. A lot of you mentioned you're not thrilled with being leaders, right? It puts a big spotlight under you. It puts a lot of pressure and responsibility on you, right? But our ability to lead effectively is an important skill that we'll need for the rest of our lives. We also took some time to talk about some of the different leadership roles, such as functional roles, leaders who are focused on achieving tasks, transformative leaders who are about changing hearts and minds, the idea of deck leadership, somebody who as a leader is involved in the entire process, right? Who's helping to raise the sails, and steer the ship, and do the things as somebody on deck, not somebody who's in the background and just barking orders at people, right? So some of the leadership traits that we've talked about: good communication ability, good responsibility, having good intelligence and energy. Those are things that we look to. And so we'll be talking more about how we can effectively do those things today. The strategies that make somebody a good leader in a group setting, and the practices that we can take to effectively manage and facilitate group involvement effectively. So you do not need to know all of these, but we spent some time last class talking about the nature-nurture debate, right? In psychology and sociology, discussion about nature versus nurture is a discussion about whether certain traits and behaviors of people are things that are hard-coded, right, determined genetically, versus things that are developed over time through our involvement in environment, in our social relationships, and so on. And there's a lot of question as to what degree leadership is an innate quality, something that we are born with, or something we develop over time, right? And what studies and research tell us is that the nurturers generally have it, that leadership skills are things that we can develop, we can cultivate, and create through effective involvement in groups, right? It is certainly true that some people have qualities that allow them to become better leaders in certain situations, right? Sometimes there are people who are naturally charismatic, who are naturally empathetic, who have qualities that they can really ease into a leadership role. But that does not necessarily mean, right, that these skills such as humility, so on, directly transfer without any work. If you're open, you're a good personality, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're naturally going to be a good leader if you're not detail-oriented or transparent or clear, right? You could have a lot of charisma, but you could also be poor at organizing, communicating clearly, and making the expectations of the group known, right? And in the same vein, the idea of what it means to be a good leader, what are the good traits or qualities that we look for, are very different across situation and culture, right? If you're in a D&D group, you oftentimes are looking for a dungeon master who is very engaged, is interesting, is creative, right? Who's really into it, has a lot of ideas and world building. But if you're looking for a supervisor, generally speaking, you probably want somebody who's transparent, who's to the point, right? Who doesn't go on and on. Very different sets of things that you're looking for there, right? So we also know from the measures of cultural difference, things such as low versus high context culture, power distance, those are going to impact the qualities that we look for as well. For example, right, here, it might be more common for a leader to be somebody with whom you could openly discuss or disagree, but having an open door policy for people to discuss, disagree with the leader's decisions might not apply the same way in another culture. So thinking carefully about what it means to be a good leader means thinking about how those leadership qualities look very different, right? Just because somebody has been born into leadership capacity does not necessarily mean they're going to be a leader themselves. It's important for us to think about the combination of factors that can impact our involvement in group leadership. All that to say, it's very easy for us to develop a learned helplessness with regard to leadership. In other words, we think, oh, I'm not a leader. I'm not that kind of person. I'm not a good leader. I can never be a leader. And as a result, not do the skills and practice needed in order to become one, and be able to take on those skills when we need to, right? Those are skills that you can learn through hard work, through engagement, and through practice. This brings us to the idea of situations that give rise to leadership, right? So when we think about leaders that we're involved with or how we have become leaders in different situations, there is what's considered to be three primary ways that leadership happens. The first is the idea of an appointed leader, right? An appointed leader is somebody who is coming on to take a leadership role that, generally speaking, somebody else like a manager, a CEO, or president has created, right? One example here in the United States is we might think about a cabinet, right? A lot of members of a presidential cabinet are people that the president will appoint. And while it is true that they need to oftentimes go through the Senate for approval, generally speaking, it's not the most controversial, right? So things such as Secretary of State, Transportation, Housing and Urban Development, those are positions that generally somebody will appoint in order to fulfill the role. As another state level example, right, there was a lot of discussion and debate over the governor's race with regard to Oregon Health Authority, which was in charge of delegating resources and funding to address issues of homelessness and mental health, right? And one of the things that all the candidates agreed on was to throw out and appoint a new leader for the OHA. That's an example of an appointed leader coming from that institutional level. One advantage to an appointed leader is oftentimes if you have a lot of trust or faith in the person or manager who's appointing that person, or that appointer is somebody who has good knowledge of the issue, that they will get a leader who's qualified and able to do the job, right? Sometimes an appointed leader is naturally somebody who took on a previous role, like a deputy position, who takes on that appointed position. But one major disadvantage is that it's not a democratic process, so people might feel frustrated or dislike the leader, right? They don't necessarily feel like they were involved in the process, and somebody has been appointed for whom you do not personally feel a close attachment or trust in. You weren't involved in the process, you don't know who they are, you might be disagreeing with them being chosen, right? So pros and cons. Secondarily, we have the idea of a democratic leader, right? A democratic leader is somebody that's chosen by the group. You might think about this as ASEOU president, thinking about it as like a class president, thinking about like a student council or leadership, or becoming a chair or secretary or vice president of your group or organization. One really big advantage to that is that people do have a say, right? They get to be involved, they get to pick who gets to lead the group. And it also means that if that person has aspirations of continuing in that position, there might be another election, they would have to be reelected or reappointed, at which point they have to continue to be a leader who responds to the needs of the group. One disadvantage, right, is that if somebody is democratically elected, if it's a tight race or there's disagreement, they might find that there is a segment of the group that doesn't support them or is less willing to hear what they have to say. So the ability to shore up and gain support from detractors is more challenging, right? And then the third idea is what's known as an emergent leader. So an emergent leader is somebody who is forced to become a leader because they have to, not necessarily because they want to. For instance, maybe you have become team captain because all of the seniors who were supposed to take on the team captain role the next year ended up leaving or transferring. So all of a sudden it falls upon you, right? So the emergent leader role is oftentimes one of the trickiest for us to maintain. One example of this, I wanted to share a clip. There was a TV show on NBC that got moved over to Netflix called Designated Survivor. And the premise of the show is that Kiefer Sutherland's character is a secretary of education, right, who is not clearly not the first in line to the presidency. There's several steps and positions you have to go through before the Secretary of Education takes on that role. But all of a sudden, right, there is an attack. A lot of people in leadership are killed or incapacitated, and suddenly he is asked to become president. And so the show is very much about him trying to take on the emergent leader role, to gain trust, to gain support, and to understand what that role will mean for him. You know, well, it's like a TV show, right? Very dramatic in many ways over the top. I do think some of the lines and points actually speak well to the challenges that face emergent leaders when they take on this role in a group setting. So I'll share this.
Hello. Who is this?
Your daughter?
No, that's not possible. My daughter's asleep, and I know that because I kissed her goodnight almost 2 hours ago.
Mommy coming home.
There are times when we get kissed. You're gonna be asleep by then, right? There are times when history makes us.
Can I catch?
Night, little Pete.
Which is the same American shared by our father. Our mom.
It's weird. Yeah, I was just going like to. Your secretary gave me the phone. I'm like, what the hell is going on?
I said, put the phone down.
Eagle is gone. So you are now the president of the United States.
It's the most devastating attack on our country since 9/11. Any kind of responsibility?
Yeah.
I've never been elected to anything.
Did you know President Richmond fired him this morning? Now he's the president.
And they don't realize he has no business running our country.
We're in a state of war. Tom Kirkland is not gonna get us through this. How am I doing? Not scared of any. You're the leadership. Things that contest us right now. What do you want me to do, General? Declare war? There are different ways to show force. We are going to do this my way. If it doesn't work, we'll try yours. Just on my side.
The law's on your side.
So, you know, very dramatic explosions, dramatic music over the top, but again, there's a lot of examples here of the emergent leader challenges. You have people who don't trust you, who don't think you should be in the role, who might want you to step down from the role. You have learning curve and adjustment, right? Like when he's in this military meeting and does not have the framework for understanding the war, the issues that are happening, developing those on-the-fly skills, drawing from your previous experience and background, doing things your way and trying to figure out a way to incorporate your experience. Those are all things that oftentimes emergent leaders are doing. So in other words, the title alone does not make somebody a leader, right? Just because somebody is appointed does not necessarily mean that they're actually being a leader. Sometimes we have people who are leaders by title alone and in practice are not doing the things that they need to be doing. So if we know some of the types of leaders and how people can be brought into positions of leadership, there are a variety of things that somebody can do in order to exhibit the traits of leadership that we really want. One of the things is to lead yourself. Again, to be the kind of person that members of the group are aspiring to be like, or holding yourself to the same standard as other people, right? That you do not have your own set of rules, but that you're doing like a track practice, you're running laps, you're running with them. Don't let yourself become the dictator, right? So there is a fine line to balance here. On the one end, you do want to delegate tasks and responsibilities, because if you as a leader are doing everything yourself, you're going to be overstretched, you're going to be frustrated, you are going to have way more on your plate than you need to effectively do the tasks. But if you delegate everything to everybody else, right, you don't do anything yourself, that can be the other end of the problem. So delegating, but being open and having your own role in the group is really important. Being open to new ways of doing things is another key idea here, right? So we've talked about tradition, the idea that doing things how they've been done in the past can sometimes be a useful strategy, but sometimes there's a better, more efficient new way of doing something. Maybe you've taken paper minutes in the past and switching to online, like using a Google Doc or something similar, having a group chat is a great way to modernize your group. So when somebody floats an idea about a new thing to do or a change to make, right? It's an opportunity to praise and support them for implementing a change that benefits the group. It creates an expectation about how other members of the group might behave, that they can do that too. Valuing diversity is really important, right? The idea here that while we might ultimately be working toward a task or goal, it's creating a space through which everybody is able to have a seat at the table and participate and be valued, right? So promoting accessibility resources that allow people to participate is important. Additionally, thinking about a genuine commitment. So one rule of thumb, a good way to think about your involvement, is that most of the time, people in your group are going to have the same intensity as you or lower, right? Not normally higher. In other words, you're setting the bar for how involved people in the group are going to be. If you show up late, if you're uninterested, you're unengaged, you don't participate, right? That sends a message to other people in the group about how they should act. So come in with the level of engagement that you want from other people. Focus on results, right? Groups do not have meetings for the sake of meetings. They have the meetings for the sake of accomplishing goals. So focusing on those things and working backwards, developing a plan to get things done is really important. Showing appreciation. Somebody has done something really good for the group. Expressing and sharing that, I think, is really important. Appreciation for a group means that you're able to understand that people are coming in with a lot of challenges and apprehension about bringing ideas forward, and avoiding playing favorites, but spotlighting things that you like that are going well in the group is a good idea. Leaders learn, right? So, like we saw in that video clip, you might be put in a big Pentagon meeting and forced to try to figure those things out in a movie, but probably not in real life. But most of the time, we do find ourselves needing to take on tasks and responsibilities and developing a leadership identity that we don't necessarily start with. So it's figuring out what are the things you're good at. Maybe you're really detail oriented, maybe you're really good at connecting with people. What are the strengths that you have and how can you play to those strengths and how you behave in a group setting? Giving yourself the opportunity to make mistakes and fall forward and take responsibility for those. Developing a plan along with roles and responsibilities really matters too, right? Recognizing that people in a group to work effectively need to know what's going on, what they should be expected to do, and making sure that you've communicated those expectations as clearly as possible. Things such as creating an agenda, creating minutes, creating roles for the group, making sure that we're all on the same page for when we do end up having meetings. A key idea here with regard to developing good leadership in a group is to develop a sense of community, right? So there's a lot of like slang and buzzwords and language to describe the experience. Like we're like a family here, right? That's been used to describe a lot of corporations or other groups that might be creating a sense of community. And this has been a challenge over the last 3 years in the context of COVID, right? Where different groups have responded to the need for community very differently. For example, right, I coached debate for several years, and one of our challenges when COVID hit, it was a lot harder for us to recruit and engage with new students because a lot of the activities that got people excited, like traveling to their first tournament, those were things that we did face to face, right? So creating a sense of community has been made a lot more difficult, but our definition of what community is has been shaped in really new ways. So community, right, is the idea of creating shared interest, it's creating interaction, it's allowing us to come together effectively. I mentioned earlier that creating the opportunity for small talk, for people introducing and sharing things about themselves, doing icebreakers, it might seem useless, but in practice, it does help groups work together more effectively because they know each other, they trust each other better, they're building rapport with each other, they're finding out who they work well with together, right? So creating community does benefit groups as a whole. It allows us to connect with one another. There's been a lot of debate and discussion about to what degree we can facilitate community face-to-face versus in more remote settings, right? There's challenges with doing that remotely, but also a lot of opportunities that come with it too, right? I was seeing a meme that was circulating around that was like, you're in a group, like you're in a club or activity, and you're in when they have a group chat that has like a really unhinged name that has nothing to do with what you actually work on as a group. You have this bizarre group chat that might be on Slack, Discord, Facebook Messenger, text. Having those opportunities to connect with people and create community in those ways even if you're just sending each other really silly gifts every now and then, is a good way to create a sense of community in virtual spaces too. That brings us to the importance of good leadership skills online, right? The fact is that a lot of us are going to need to work with, network, and communicate with people online, whether it's through sending emails, whether it's through hosting meetings, right? Even if we're doing jobs that entail a lot of physical labor, virtual messaging is a major way that information about that work is going to be shared. So clear expectations is especially important virtually. What you should ask yourself whenever you're involved with leading a virtual meeting is, what do I expect people to do? What level of work does the person need to do when they go into a meeting? Do they need their video on? Do they need their audio on? Those things are important because making a decision is going to dictate how people are coming into the meeting. Are they setting up a space knowing they're going to be on camera, right? Or are they going to be wearing pajamas with audio on, right? So being really clear about what it is that you're asking people to do in a meeting is really important. Organizing effectively is important too. Again, said it before, I'll say it again. I cannot tell you how many Zoom meetings I've been in which the meeting has started 20 minutes late because the host who created the meeting is not there. The person who's running the meeting is trying to screen share, and they don't have screen sharing enabled, so they try to call the person who originally hosted the meeting to get them to enable screen sharing. And it happens so many times, right? One of the easiest things you can do is tech test, jump into the meeting ahead of time, check the settings of the meeting, play around with the meeting to make sure that you've got it working the way that you need to. Giving prompt and meaningful responses, right? So it's very easy for meetings to get off track and tangential. So asking people to participate in a really clear way, telling them who is speaking and what they need to say is important. And a positive tone is really important as well, because the energy will get sucked out of virtual meetings way more quickly than face-to-face. So it's important to maintain good energy throughout the meeting. We also can think about the idea of socialization. Again, not only is it about creating a sense of community, but also the idea that a leader is creating a setting in which people can work together and talk with one another in a natural way, right? People are choosing to chat with each other after the group meeting. They're sending each other texts. They are sitting next to each other, right? It's the idea that you don't get to choose who gets to be friends or get along in the group. Sometimes people hit it off who you don't expect. But the opportunity to create those connections is something that you are facilitating as a leader of a group. You're not saying, oh, you two have to be friends, right? That'd be absurd. It's allowing the natural development of a group to happen. So oftentimes, right, when we're creating a group, what we're having to develop is a sense of what makes for a good or successful team. For instance, perhaps you're interested in creating something like a study group, right? Or a new club on campus that meets some of your own interests. One of the challenges for you would be developing a sense of who you would want in that group. What qualities are you looking for, and how would you allow that group to work together effectively? So one of the key ideas here is, what is the purpose? This might be a mission statement, right? That the group has developed that goes over why the group is here, what the group is designed to do. Maybe you are a group who really enjoys outdoor activities, or maybe you're oriented toward a particular cultural, social, or political cause. Making sure that people understand why the meeting is here and what they're doing is important. You're a study group. You're not necessarily a social club, even if there might be social opportunities. A good place for the group to meet, right? Whether it's face-to-face, whether it's remote or virtual, the key here is consistency. You have a consistent time, you have a consistent place, and the group starts to feel like one that people incorporate into their schedules and take really seriously. They're involved in. When I was involved in speech and debate in college, one of our problems was that we had like a team room, but that team room was way off in a random dorm in a random basement, and nobody could access that room well. So we got that room moved to somewhere a lot closer, and we had much more productive time together. We were able to get things done, collaborate together, have a shared space to work, right? So the role of place and space is really important for effective group meetings. Good leadership from within, right? Being the leader that you want people to behave similar to is important. Norms and a rule of code of conduct. Those are things that can develop over time as the group develops. So You might be familiar with the phrase that every rule has a story, right? A lot of groups who have been around for a while and have a code of conduct or a set of rules generally have those because things have happened that have gone wrong that have necessitated creating those rules in the first place. You might think about the norms and rules as guidelines that make sense with the purpose and the expectations of the group, right? Maybe if you're working on a study group, the expectation is that people don't bring in food, people have their phones on silent, right? If you're too open, then you allow the group to not fulfill its purpose. If you're too closed, it can start to feel like a dictatorship, right? Where you're being given a long set of rules that everybody has to follow. It might not seem reasonable. Letting people have a range of different roles is really important, right? So one of the greatest paradoxes of good group leadership is the idea that being a group leader is recognizing that you can't do everything yourself. You need to put things on other people's plates. If you are running a meeting, you're also running minutes, you're also the treasurer, you're also the secretary, right? You're not going to be able to do any of those tasks as well as you could otherwise do if you delegate. So giving people different roles is important to help groups run more efficiently, to let them go better, but also is really good because think about it this way, right? You're giving people opportunity to take on those new roles. It's a new line in their resume, it's in a professional setting, but you're also helping to train people to take on a leadership role in the future, right? That's why somebody like a vice president or a secretary of a student club or organization might be the person who's next in line to take on president or leader role in the group because they've already developed some leadership experience. And letting people resolve conflicts that follow the expectations of the group, right? So if conflicts escalate, as a group leader, we are expected to step in, but we shouldn't see a minor disagreement that's happening between two people and feel like we need to insert ourselves into that right away, right? It's finding the opportunity to jump in when it escalates, but also recognizing that you're working with people for whom they should be able to figure it out on their own. And if they do, they might learn more than they might have if they just worked with you. And lastly, before today's attendance activity, one thing to think about is how teams are able to learn effectively with each other, right? One of the important things to do here is to make sure that people have the resources and skills that they need to work together. If you're deciding who to hire for a job, right, you would make sure that everybody got access to the applicants, got the information they needed to make a decision. So making sure that people are looped in the resources that they need is important. Sometimes as a leader, you might have private information you can't share with the group, but recognizing what's in that camp versus what people should be able to access is important. Visibly accounting for attendance and participation, right? Paper trail, paper trail, paper trail, making sure that people get access to meeting minutes that show people who are in attendance is really important. You can use that to trace later. If there's somebody in your group who wasn't participating, maybe you're in a class, right? And you're preparing for a project. One thing you could do on a group project where somebody isn't participating, create some minutes, right? Document those minutes and use those to show that this person was a part of my group but didn't participate and impacted the group as a whole. Working with people who are struggling is important too, right? You step in. If you notice that somebody in your group is having a hard time, you diagnose and help them figure out the problem. And sometimes just reaching out helps them to do better because they recognize that they're getting that added support. Recognizing situations that might mean somebody is in trouble, right? So for instance, a lot of parents and a lot of teachers are trained to recognize that if there's something going wrong, like, you know, a kid is showing up with bruises, right? That's a sign that there might be abuse and harm that's happening that needs to be flagged. And then building communities online that can accommodate personal interaction. So again, doing things such as group chats or creating spaces for people to communicate with one another digitally is a way that can really help people to connect. So what I would like you to do as your first major part of attendance is to take a few minutes on your own. In this scenario, we have Susan, who's trying to lead a new study group on campus for chemistry, but she's having some problems with running this group well. Based on some of the things we've talked about, what are things that Susan can do to build a successful team in which they can work together and learn effectively? So give Susan some possible solutions for things that she can do to make her study group go well. And secondarily, what are some things Susan can do to be a good leader, right? So what are qualities, behaviors, actions, and so on that she can take that will allow her to facilitate a good group. So I'll give you some time to think about this, and then I'll have you share some of your thoughts on this in groups. when you have wrapped up your thoughts here, what I'll ask that we do is take some time in small groups to talk about your suggestions, to compare the suggestions that you had for Susan, and to write down some of the things that you're noticing, including some things that you might have in common. So once you have finished the part 1 of attendance, we'll do a group of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 over here. Then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 over here.
Yeah, and also make sure people bring the best control. Groups like people who have done, not very helpful. Make sure you so that make sure that employees have this for the group well. Also, make sure that I'm making sure like those records are accessible so people can get go there and get something.
There.
I also set out my expectations and my future
So take another minute or two to share.
So it looks like in general, the participating on 5, that's the part. Allow it to have the stuff available.
So I had a chance to hover and hear some of the things that you all were sharing in groups regarding some of the things that we should have Susan do. So a few things that really came to mind that you all were sharing that I think are really important as we're thinking about a group. So a few folks like Nick Burkett brought up the importance of, having the people ultimately doing well in this group. So one thing that we can think about in these kinds of groups is about assessment, right? So you're doing a study group, you're preparing for an exam, okay, right? People had their first exam, how did it go? What went well for people in the group? What allowed them to do better on that activity? What were the things that didn't go well and were not helpful from studying? Maybe working on and developing practice questions was great, but going around and sharing like a summary of the chapter didn't end up being that useful, right? So in a group like this one, using the past to take inventory on what could be changed or done differently in the future and seeking input from people in the group is a great way to make sure that the group can go well. Another thing that people talked a lot about were creating a setting that was accessible, that was supportive, that didn't include distractions, especially recognizing that this is to study, and being clear about what those expectations are is important, right? And Susan being able to delegate and allow other people in the group to do things like minutes or notes from the meeting, and letting her balance out some of those responsibilities is important too. Again, a good leader is not the person who does everything, but the person who recognizes when they need to lean on to other people and allow us to all collaborate effectively. So I appreciated the points that you all were discussing and bringing in to help us to think in a well-rounded way. How can we create a good setting for people to work together while having enough guidance as the leader of the group that lets that group run as smoothly as it can? So to wrap up the key ideas for today, we talked about how we can create a good environment, we can deal with changing circumstances and adapt, and how we are able to use active teamwork and collaboration effectively in these group leadership settings. On Friday, we'll be looking at some of the challenges related to leading and participating in groups. One of the big ones being the problem of groupthink and the ways that we can work together effectively to address those challenges in a group setting. So go ahead and either email or pass forward your attendance for the day. Have a great rest of your afternoon, and I'll see you again on Friday.
Thank you.